Okay, so let's back up and talk about. We were talking about things that sustain,
Yes.
and the relationship between the individual and the individual's leader, the rest of the institution.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question would be, if you wanted to tell some stories, or just talking theoretical terms about how important the relationship between the teacher and the supervisor is.
Well, I found my relationship with my early manager here, John LaValle. Um, John was probably one of the best managers I've ever had in my life, and the reason being is I'm a smart guy and I have a lot of ideas about things. Some of the ideas are good, some of the ideas not so good. And John was great for me because whenever I had an idea, I could go to him and say, I have this idea. And he would say, Gary, that's a really bad idea. Go away, come back to me when you have a better idea. And if I came back to him the next day with another idea, he would not remind me that the previous day I had a stupid idea. He would just let me give him another idea. And sometimes the idea would be great. Sometimes the idea would be, that's pretty good, but if we do this, that, and the other thing, it's better. And then he would forward the idea. And in my case, never attempting to steal the credit per se, but always saying, hey, here's a good idea coming out of my division. And so in that regard, I always felt that I had a supportive ear to give an idea to. And in the early days when I was here, I started by being in charge of the associate's degree in networking. And my charge was to create a bachelor's degree in networking, which was then followed with a bachelor's degree in digital forensics, which was followed by an online bachelor's degree in forensics, and then a bachelor's degree in information security. And every step along the way, I think we were able to do that not because I'm necessarily so clever, but I was in an environment that was, I think, far more entrepreneurial than we really are right now. That basically, if you had a good idea and you were willing to follow up on it and take responsibility to collect the resources and that kind of stuff, if it seemed like a good idea, then we were allowed to follow it up. And in that regard, it didn't cause me to be inspired, but it certainly cultivated any inspiration I might have had.
One of the things that sustains a thinking person is the act of thinking. To
Yes.
have that act of thinking recognized and reciprocated is a form of, so to speak, respect, but also kind of pampering and stimulation in
Oh,
itself.
sure. There's no question that the more you think, the better you get at it, and the faster you are. And in fact, so since this really is about teaching, when I first started, some of the courses I were teaching were very, very much, let's say, fact-based. That, somebody really did need to know what is the function of the third bit of the fourth byte of an IP header, that kind of stuff. And as I got into other courses, I was trying to think of the fact that, so much of this stuff they can look up. And they'll know those functions because every day they'll be doing it and they'll know what these things are. What I really wanted them, as we were really raising the bar in this whole, lifelong learning thing and problem solving, critical thinking, was I wanted students to think. And I remember the first time I ever gave a test, and it was a take-home test. Students, for some reason, always want take-home tests. They have no clue, really, about why they don't really want that. But anyway, so I was giving out this test, and I had a problem on it. And I forget what the problem was, but some student asked about, where they would get that kind of information. And I said, well, that's the kind of information, I got to tell you, you're not going to be able to find in Google, and you're not going to be able to find in a book. And to be quite honest with you, I don't even know if I know the right answer. And the student was horrified and said, how can you possibly grade a problem that you don't know the answer to? And I said, well, I want to see what your answer is. And I may not know the right answer, but I can tell a thought process when I see one. And I want to see your thought process. And I've told students from the moment they walk across the threshold, in terms of writing and thinking both, that the more you do, the better you get at it, you'll get faster at it, and you'll enjoy it more. Because, you and I have talked about the fact that as seniors, I still have some students that can't string words together and form sentences. I'm in a field where people say, digital forensics, that's so techy. if you know how to use a computer, you should be okay. But in fact, the last step of the digital forensics process is writing a report. And if you didn't write it down, you may as well not have done it. And if you can't sit in front of a judge and a jury and properly explain what you did, you become opposing counsel's best friend. And it's not my job to be producing people that are opposing counsel's best friend. And sometimes students don't, quite get the importance of reading and writing and thinking to the stuff they do, because, hell, it's only a computer. Give me a soldering iron and I'm happy.
You're looking at this relationship, this kind of thought relationship in both looking up and looking down. You're talking about it as a sort of a stimulating thing in relationship and in your dealings with your supervisor, but also you're talking about it as a stimulating thing in terms of your relationship with your students. Now, what that also leads to is that you're talking about a profoundly volatile teaching environment.
Yes.
And that volatility is really something that can be enhanced or repressed at an institutional level.
Yes. It can be enhanced, and you're right. It can be put down. It's hard to know how to create it. I mean, there's so much alchemy to it. And in that regard, I guess it is like cooking. You throw all the ingredients in and hope the right things fester up. But you're right, it really does involve getting the right people in the right place. I actually haven't given that a lot of thought in those regards, but you're absolutely right. And I don't know that I have really realized till we've started talking about this the last few months and thinking about this, that exactly how volatile the situation is, and you can't create institutional goodness, and you certainly can't create it by saying we will have X number of credits of this because X number of credits indicates quality. I mean, I'm a math major, and even I know that's horse hockey. There's this quote one of the accountants of all people has on their desk that says something about not everything that you can count has value, and not everything of value can be counted. And yet we try too much to come up with a cookie cutter approach to, if we prescribe this, we will get certain outcomes. And certainly teaching is very individual, learning is very individual. I'm pleased to say that I have been inspired by my students to learn more things about myself that has affected my relationships with other teachers and supervisors, etc., as I've allowed my relationships with supervisors and others to affect my teaching and my relationship with my students, because obviously it's just one big web continuum, if you will. But it's hard to take a cookie cutter approach. And I think sometimes our failure of management is that we're either too afraid or don't know how to manage people on an individual basis, nor do we know how to manage programs or departments on an individual basis. Therefore, we come up with one set of criteria and do everybody the same way, because that way it's fair. But I don't know that it's most efficacious.